Once upon a time, there was a fella named James Rolfe who did little short film things. One day in the year 2004, he made a couple joke NES reviews that would later be part of the Cinemassacre Gold VHS collection, whatever that is. And that's where they would stay before Rolfe decided to revive the gimmick for online consumption in 2006 as the Angry Nintendo Nerd, where people took a liking to his complaining about old Nintendo games and their various quirks with various colorful metaphors. Eventually, the popularity of the re-christened Angry Video Game Nerd became such that somebody made a video game about him, and that's today's subject matter, the Angry Video Game Nerd Angry Video Game, released in 2008 by Eric Ruth. Rolls right off the fucking tongue, doesn't it? Anyway, it's a fan game where you control the nerd through 8 levels of side-scrolling platforming action, tossing empty beer bottles at all sorts of random foes. Which actually would make more sense for the nerd to use beer bottles as an attack, but I guess that would be infringing too much on obscure superheroes The Lush and Potty Mouth. Somebody should probably sue, but more than likely nobody is going to get that. So in all seriousness, the Angry Video Game Nerd Angry Video Game is a fairly simplistic platformer. There's not a whole lot to this game. You move to the right, you kill all the bad guys that take way too many hits to die, even the coffee cups. Try to avoid falling into pits, reach the end of the level, kill the end level boss to move on to the next level, and you repeat a few more times until you reach the end of the game and you get a nerd video or something. Sometimes the game will shift gears and put you in a scrolling shooter segment, but the general idea remains the same. You have a jump button and 2 fire buttons. One button shoots straight ahead, though really it's mostly tossing them downwards towards the floor.
Blown up some ships shooting cannonballs, metallic sea urchins, and good thing the Rolling Rocks work underwater.
And another that tosses bottles in an upward arc, which seems mighty inconvenient, but is actually the more useful attack. Killing some enemies will sometimes drop exclamation points, which restores a bit of health, and on rarer occasions, enemies will even drop extra lives. You begin the game with 3, and once you lose them all, it's game over, no continues, no passwords. It is what it is.
Man, who the hell's throwing tires at me? Nobody throws tires at me.
So it's a fairly straightforward platformer game. Like I said, there's not a whole lot to it. And the game is played with the keyboard as there's no gamepad support. Still, you'll need to whip up one of those joy-to-key programs that lets you map keyboard strokes to your gamepad of choice if that's the route you want to take. And playing with the gamepad is the better option, as the default keyboard mapping feels a bit awkward to use, and there's no way to change them. There's 2 configurations, but I don't know, I've never felt comfortable using them, which is why I would go with the gamepad. But once you get past that hurdle, controls themselves are fairly responsive and the nerd himself moves around rather smoothly. One caveat is that whenever you take a hit, your attacks are temporarily disabled. Don't know if that's a glitch, intentional, or maybe something that couldn't be helped in the game making process, but it is something you need to get used to and naturally is the only real sticking point in an otherwise fine little fan game. The Angry Video Game Nerd Angry Video Game does not go the same route as the later AVGN games from Freak Zone does. It's not trying to recreate the perception of Nintendo hard platformers or anything of the sort. It is, however, going along with a joke that you're making a game based on the nerd, and a large chunk of what's happening in the game is made up stuff that never really happened in the show. Remember when this happened in AVGN?
Oh my god, a spider. Remember that? Remember that from the Angry Video Game Nerd? Remember when I fight a spider? Remember when I fight a giant fucking spider?
Because I sure don't. But then again, this game was made during a much simpler time, and had it come out today, half this shit probably would have been in the Nerd Show, because that show fell off the rails a long time ago, but I digress. Anyways, this isn't a necessarily difficult game. There's some patterns and some quirks that you have to adjust to, like delayed firing during invincibility frames, some questionable dickish enemy placement, and of course some unfortunate knockback, but otherwise it's fairly straightforward fare that persistent players can beat within an hour's time at most. Graphics attempt to emulate the pseudo-NES style of pixel art in that you have graphics that look like something out of a typical NES game, but with more colors than the system would normally allow. And also, a lot of the artwork is a bit on the crude side of things with little details, so while it's not a spectacular looking game, it's not too bad looking overall. The nerd kind of looks like the nerd, and some of the enemy designs are somewhat creative at least. What does any of this have to do with the nerd? Absolutely nothing, but isn't that kind of the whole point of this thing in the first place? So here's a weird thing, this game has no sound effects. There's chip music, and rather catchy chip music I should add, but no actual sound effects of any kind. Instead, what you do get is occasional commentary from the nerd himself. That's right, James Rolfe actually recorded commentary and even an ending video for this fan game.
Very few people get the opportunity to go to space, but if I had the chance, I think I'd pass. Man, I never want to go through space. I get sick. Yeah, man, I get nauseous if I ever go to space.
The line readings obviously lack the energy and enthusiasm of a typical nerd outing, but it's still a cool thing to include, even if the timing of certain voice bites tend to be off at times. Overall, the Angry Video Game Nerd Angry Video Game game thing. Again, that's a title that rolls right off the fucking rails. But yeah, this is a fun little game that doesn't have the budget, extravagance, polish, or sound effects of the recent crop of nerd games, but there's a charm of a simpler time, a more straightforward game that focuses on fun, solid platforming.
All these ass cannons and cock rockets and shit bombs coming at me from everywhere.
So I had this sitting around a hard drive for a while and decided to give it a whirl, liked it enough to make a little video about it. I'm not sure if this is still available to download, you may have to do a little looking, but if it is, it's definitely a game worth checking out if you want a fun nerd platformer, or at least you want one that doesn't go crazy with the difficulty or the death blocks.